Are you getting back on time? Okay, well, I don't know where I'm hearing it from. Never mind. We're going to go. But
Hello. Hi, everyone. So good to see everybody in person. It's an in-person Issues and AM. And also a round of applause for the many hundreds of folks who are watching virtually as well. I'm not exactly sure where the camera is, though, so where should we? Oh, right there. Oh, there we are, virtually. And we're hoping for folks virtually, too, that you will stay tuned and ask questions. Before we get started, I want to let folks know that Issues and Answers discussion series, sponsored by Michigan Radio, and really to engage all of you, right? Like, it's one thing for all of us to be in a radio station and not getting to hear directly from you all, but these Issues and Ale events help us decide what issues are most important and what you all want to hear about. And it's so awesome to have all of these state reps and senators here at the table too, because they are all going to hear what you're thinking and want to know as well. A huge thanks to Urban Beat for hosting tonight. Such a great event space. This event is part of Michigan Radio's America Amplified Collection Series. I hope everybody saw the swag table. If you know public radio, you know we are all about the swag. Dan Netter over there raising his hand to get some of the I voted stickers. You can also ask questions and a little QR code. So check that out. Before we start, I'm going to do one more thing. This is really important. How many folks know who Jen White is? Hands, please. Yes. I like to introduce Jen White as one of my dearest friends. She also happens to be the host of 1A on NPR. Tuesday, February 7th at 7 p.m. Jen White is going to be in Ann Arbor with the extraordinarily incredible April Bear, our host of Stateside. Right? April Bear interviewing Jen White, Rackham Auditorium, again, February 7th. Be there. That is going to be a conversation you absolutely want to be a part of. And you can also watch online or in person. Tickets are available on the events page at michiganradio.org. Events like this are made possible because of you, our members. Thank you so much. I am committed to keeping these events free so that everybody can join in, but we can only do that when you all give. So michiganradio.org, hit the donate button, and thank you very much. One final last thing, really.
Thanks for
fun. No, we're going to take your questions. So Dan Nutter, where is Dan again? There is Dan. The thing is, because there's a virtual audience, everybody, you got to ask a question into the mic so they can hear you. So Dan will be going around once we do some question time.
And Dan gets to hold on to the mic.
And Dan, yeah, don't try to steal him out, folks. Because Dan, he knows. Okay. Without further ado, let us welcome our incredible panel this evening. To my far left, physically, not necessarily on the spectrum, we have Senator John DeMoose. Welcome. Who represents Northwest Michigan as well as parts of the UP. We're really, really happy to have you here.
Thanks. What a great I love this place. This is what I like these extra discussions.
Good. We'll see if you feel the same way.
Yes.
Democratic State Senator Mallory Agmuro, welcome. State Senator for second term, who represents parts of Wayne and Oakland counties. We're thrilled to have you.
I am so thrilled to be here, and I'm so thrilled that there's so many people here. Yay! Thank you everybody for coming.
And also, I think there's someone you need to say hi to at the. Hi Noah. Hi Kevin.
My husband Ryan, my almost 2-year-old.
Hi Noah, your mom.
Everybody say hi.
Rick Pluta, who represents all of Michigan public radio listeners. Rick Pluta is the co-host.
I'm an at-large delegate.
Right, at-large delegate. He is co-host of Extreme Politics on Michigan Radio. He's also the senior capital correspondent of the Michigan Public Radio Network. Thanks for sitting through my monologue. We have Democratic Representative Christian Grant here to my right. First time state representing, it's sort of like Southeast Grand Rapids. Yeah. So great to have you here. Especially because this is like your first couple days.
Brand new. This is actually my first speaker session.
Yes, and so finally on my far right, yeah, correct. It's Republican State Representative Brian Posthumus. Northern Rapids.
Yeah, Northern Grand Rapids, suburbs metropolitan area, Rockford, Sparta.
And this is your second term.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, indeed. Okay. With that, I think where I want to start is the fact that, as you have heard on Michigan radio, because I will not stop blabbering about it, we are fundamentally in a completely different Lansing. Look around. Physically, it may not look like it, but boy, oh boy, 40 years it has been since Democrats have run this town, this state. Right, you have the executive office, and again, first time in 40 years, the state house and state senate. Now I want to start with you because you were in the minority just a few weeks ago, and now you are in the majority. Does it feel different in Lansing yet?
It feels very different. It is my first 4 years serving in the minority. I was the district the first time I ran for office in 2018. I introduced 49 bills over the first 4 years, and not a single one ever even got through. So I was actually looking forward to it second term, and I said passing a bill on any issue. I was told you might get to do a little bit more than that. So it feels very different. It's exciting, but we also know that there's a lot of responsibility.
Representative Posthumus, same question, all of it for you. Used to have all the power.
It's a great time.
Yeah. Nothing you like more than sitting out here talking about losing. I heard that one.
It's definitely a lot different, we taste that just our first session day. Normally, we got to decide when we would adjourn, when we would start session, when we would go into caucus, and we didn't know why we were sitting on the floor for an hour doing nothing, not like physically on the floor. I mean, not for the House of Representatives. And now after these things, I don't know why, and I don't know when it's going to change. So it's definitely a lot different, but you know what? I didn't come to just be a majority. I came to Lansing to represent my constituents and make policy for the future. So I'm looking forward to doing that.
Representative Grant, it's all new for you.
So
There isn't anything to compare it to. What's the first couple weeks like?
You know, stories of how different it is and how different it will be. You know, as a caucus, we are changing our position to the position
So
of
what are you
being the
listening
leader
to?
and being the ones who represent the voters and not just telling our constituents.
Because, I mean, the house is a bit of the Wild West, I've always been a little bit more. Some people, but the point of the matter is, I don't think that out of people, I think we have way too much of the same here today, so I think we need president. So we're part of that.
I was gonna let Rick ask the next question, but no. I just feel like it's different that we always hear one guy just yelling at each other. You're actually saying
I think the mass of voters. They want us to be in my primary, John, we don't want you to be front. We know what you're doing. We want to the point of it is, where's the dog?
And YouTube. And that's what
Then else, let's go work. So I understand. I have been plans within the house to try to present it than it is out in the referendum. And I think that's
yes, no.
Agreed.
Does anyone else say no? Yeah, I mean, in my experience, nothing like it's very good experience. But electors notice it, they want to compromise from what they don't want to deal with. And, you know, I mean, those things are synonymous, except outside of, Lansing. Political. I guess I wanted to start with you, Senator, because you're the veteran here who served in the same chamber in both the minority and the majority. What do Democrats have some, do you go big at the beginning and get the controversial stuff done, or do you sort of ease it?
I think the answer is neither and both. I'm really proud.
You're already doing this.
I'm a veteran. You said 4 whole years makes me a veteran. I'm really proud of the fact that we came together in both the House and the Senate. We introduced 6 bills day one that send a message as to who we are. And it covers cost of living, it covers some of the fundamental right issues, so it's expanding EITC, repealing the retirement tax, repealing the 1931 abortion ban because we know anything about dogs.
be able to go, as far left as
By
some.
frontline, you mean competitive seats?
Very competitive districts. They won by a slim margin, or maybe their district has never been Democratic before and they're the first ones. So most times historically, those people will not take on sticky issues because they feel like they won't come back. But what I respect from my colleagues is them saying, still talk to me. Let's still talk about the issue, because the people who did go to the polls and vote for me knew that these were the things that we would be working on. And so I will absolutely listen to wisdom and knowledge from our colleagues who have been here, but we're ready to take on some new challenges.
Representative Posthumous, I would love your perspective as someone who, again, who has been in the majority, now in the minority. One thing I find really fascinating is having watched Lansing now for a minute or two. When Republicans are in charge, you guys did a lot of stuff. Some stuff that some voters agree with, some that don't. Interestingly enough, Democrats took over and Republicans were pretty quick to be like, now y'all, you should probably slow down a little bit. Is that a fair assessment a little bit? That you guys are all like, just slow down. This isn't a mandate.
So, well, yeah. So part of it is because there is, y'all are burdened with the shackles of governing now. You know what I mean? Like it's a little bit different when you, excuse me, when you're in the majority and you have that responsibility. It's a little bit different. Part of being in the minority, at least from the beginning stages, is actually kind of exciting because I can be a little bit more vocal about certain things, and I can be a little bit more affirmative in the things that I believe and the stances that I want to take, and not necessarily have to feel like, all right, I have to make this concession in order to get this thing done, in order to get this thing across the finish line. So it's just a totally different paradigm. But the reality is, when it's been so long, like I can imagine they all just have this laundry list of things that you want to get done. And realistically, for you 2 years, for you 4 years, potentially, you don't know. And so you have to try to get it done as soon when you have the opportunity to get it done.
Do you see your role in the minority now as being, of course, the opposition party, but slowing the brakes, or do you see your role in kind of coming to the table and actually trying to compromise and get some things done?
So like I said, I came to Lansing to get things done for the people in my district and for the state of Michigan. What I've said from the beginning, after the election, when we lost the House and the Senate and the governor's office, from that point, I said, there are a lot of things that both sides of the aisle agree on. And when it comes to making Michigan more competitive, and when it comes to putting more money in the pockets of hardworking Michiganders, we're going to work together on that. And I'll be at the table all day long.
Joey, can I say something though? Because I had a conversation relevant to that with one person. I won't obviously say who it is, but he actually said, I don't see what's going to be so hard about this. All we have to do is sit back for 4 years and say no. And I said to him, that's not hard. If that's what you're going to do, that's the easiest thing we can do. It's not why we're sent here, though. I mean, our job has to be, if you're sort of on the conservative side of things right now, it has to be to take bills we otherwise wouldn't agree with and try to make them what we see as better, or to sprinkle in our principles where we can, or to represent our constituency. That's still part of our job, or to find areas where, look, we can work together. And our goal is, I said this to my staff today, my goal is to find as many things as I can say yes to, so that I'm in position to actually be able to work on things that matter to our district. That's a lot harder than just sitting back and saying no.
Let's open it up to some questions on that note, shall we? I saw Dan floating around. Don't be shy, because this is what happens in these things. People don't ask questions right away. Then the first person does, the dam breaks, and then we end up spending the rest of the time. Oh, I already saw a hand. Don't even have to go into it. There we go. Dan's walking over. And why don't you say your name and then ask your question?
Elaine Fishoff from Lansing.
Hi, Lynn.
For each of the members, what are the top 3 issues in the eyes of your constituents?
Ooh, okay. And let's keep this quick, guys. So just top 3 issues. Rep. Posthumous, you want to start? Top 3 issues for your voters in your district.
Inflation, number 1, making sure that everybody has the ability to buy groceries. That's number 1. That's probably number 2 and number 3 as well.
Yeah, for my district, we are really looking at economic development. Being the urban part of Grand Rapids, we have been under invested in. So how can we bring dollars and opportunities that allow people to build their own wealth for their families? Education, quality public education is a top priority, and that people have access to jobs that provide real living wages.
Zoe, your top 3 issues.
All right, so I just want to provide a little bit of context. I went from, for the past 4 years, representing a district that was entirely within Oakland County. It was the wealthiest district in the state, to now representing a district that includes Detroit and Oakland County, covers the entire economic spectrum. It's Detroit through Birmingham. So I think about everything through the lens of what can we do to ensure that Michigan is a place where every single person is seen, heard, and supported, and has the opportunities that their neighbors do.
I think ours, well, you could do better than that. That was a good answer.
Thank you.
Yeah.
John compromised a moose over here, ladies and gentlemen.
Our district up in northern Michigan is a lot of rural areas and things, and I'd have to say it's very clear. Affordable housing is huge. Mental health is just devastating what's happening right now, and inflation is hitting us pretty hard. So.
And it's interesting because you think of, particularly your district is more rural, but I think everyone on this stage probably, when you say those, 3 issues too, hands can be raised as well. Other questions? And I'm over here, I see Dan, and then we'll get back over here. Okay.
Healthcare over the last number of years, and I'm very interested in access to healthcare, particularly primary care, to help keep people out of the ERs and out of severity of disease. One way to do that is to pass the full practice authority for nurse practitioners in the state, like I think over 30 other states in our union. Michigan is not one of those states that has full practice authority for NPs, and I wonder what each of the candidates or what each of the panelists think about full practice authority for nurse practitioners in Michigan.
Okay, that's a pretty specific question. And although I know this controversy over expanding the power of nurse practitioners, do you mean, by the way, including the ability to write prescriptions in that?
Yes, I do.
Okay, thanks. So should nurse practitioners and more medical personnel, in your opinion, be given that authority and be given that power? And by the way, a pass is an acceptable answer on this one.
Start over. Yeah, I mean, I'm not passing, but I'm not sure exactly. I'm not an expert in this area, but I do. Last year, we were championing a bill that would allow community colleges to give a 4-year bachelor's of nursing degree. And a lot of this is geographic, because right now our access to healthcare up in northern Michigan, we don't have the people. I mean, we don't have the nurses, we don't have the doctors. There's not a cardiologist in 100 miles from where I live. And so anything we can do that expands the personnel and gives them more power and more things they can do, I'm in support. I don't know about the exact policy of what they should and shouldn't be allowed to do, but nurse practitioners are extremely important. That's why we supported that nurse anesthetists last year, to let them do more, take on a bigger and bigger role, was for that very reason, to open up those things. So in general, I support those type of things.
So I'll add on to that. I think for the very most part, where I'm at on that issue is there should be drastic expansion in that. The question is, and the devil's in the details on it. There are going to be certain regulations that will have to be put in place, that we'll have to negotiate and that type of thing. But overall, I agree, and I support that issue.
You support the issue, or you support the concept?
The concept.
The concept. Okay.
For those in majority, who's the chair right now in the Senate that's the lawmaker that would take something like this up, and what committee? You know?
It would go to health policy, and that is a fantastic question.
Okay. We'll circle back to that. I think this is also an indication of just how new, right? Like this legislature is, and still figuring out
Committee
all of these
assignments
bills.
have just been
Voted
handed out.
twice.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
maybe 3 times.
I've been looking over the committee schedule grid, and I'm like, okay, what is my schedule?
I know. It's a little like the first week of school, right? Like, and your finals are tomorrow.
Or all the Sunday New York Times puzzles.
Say that again. Does that sound right, Senator Santana?
Senator Santana is over the appropriations subcommittee for the health committee. I'm not sure if she's over policy. She may be. If
Okay.
she is, fantastic.
Yeah.
I love her.
And that's something we'll absolutely follow up on. It's a great policy question. Yeah. Dan, yeah.
I'm just waving.
Oh, you didn't actually have a question, Dan? Okay, I was sort of interested. I'm like, Dan, come on, throw it down, man.
I don't know if that's working. There we go. Good evening. Thank you for the event. This is a historic opportunity for the state of Michigan, the next 8 months. My name is Marshall Clabeau, to enact the free market, the economics of solar energy independence. Where do our Republican colleagues stand on removing the 1% bill, the cap that is currently in place that is really preventing solar from the business potential of solar from unleashing and protecting Michiganders and energy
What's
independence?
called the energy portfolio and expanding the solar aspect of that.
Yeah, there's currently a 1% cap,
Okay.
and it was sitting in the
Republicans?
Energy Committee. And so I would love our colleagues, DeMoose and Pasumas, to, can we count on your support to unleash this, business?
Thank you for the question. So I've long been a huge supporter of an all of the above approach to energy production in the state and actually in the country. Specifically to that issue, I'm open to the conversation of expanding that past the 1% threshold or the 1% ceiling. What that looks like, we'd have to have deeper conversations on that, but that's absolutely something I'm open to.
Yeah, I just join with what Brian's saying, Kara. That I'd have to see the actual bill before because a lot of times there's things buried in there. I like solar. I like wind. I also like nuclear, and we need to start looking at other things. We're closing down this Palisades nuclear plant, which evidently, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but what I've heard is that one plant produces more power than all the wind and all the solar combined. And if that's true, we need to be looking at some of these other options there. Solar's great, but it's not the end all and be all. It's not the solution to everything. I think we need to look at a lot of different things. I have deep concerns about electric too, because we don't have the grid to do all that we want to do with electric vehicles. I love electric vehicles, but I sure hope they're also looking at hydrogen and other things that other technologies, because if everybody switched to an electric vehicle today, we can't power our state.
I'm going to add one thing. One of the challenges to the way our system is set up is it makes it very difficult to have really long-term planning and really long-term thinking when it comes to these types of issues, right? Like when we're talking about energy production and moving over to a more renewable future, you really have to look at a short-term, intermediate term, and a long-term 20-year, 30-year, 50-year perspective. Well, the challenge is John and I, Senator DeMoose and I, we only have
fine. We're friends.
We only have 10 years left maximum, right? But we may not be here. I may not be here 2 years from now, and so that's one of the challenges that we are going to face. Is there has to be a vision that can transcend parties, a vision that can transcend generations.
I'd love to follow up on that question about what this issue is about lawmakers staying in office too long, thus, voters overwhelmingly passing term limits now 30 years ago. Of course, this past November, a change, right? Allowing lawmakers to spend a little bit more time, but just in a chamber. Versus this idea of no, we need new blood and there's too much power that one person can hold. I'm curious from all of you sitting up here, do term limits work, and is part of this issue about why Lansing feels like it kind of ping pongs back and forth and not being able to actually create a stable plan, albeit energy, education. It's a jump ball for
So this is, I ran for office for the first time. I think it was 30 when I started running. And there is a desire for new voices, new blood to get in. And I think on its face, term limits make a lot of sense, especially when you look at what's happening on the federal government, maybe in the US Supreme Court. There is a time limit, right? Michigan went kind of the extreme opposite, where we have we had until most recently, the strictest term limits for legislators in the entire country, which meant that you think about you entering any job. It takes a couple of years to really get your feet under you, to figure out how things work, to build relationships. And here in the legislature, especially in the state house, 6 years you were in and out, and then somebody new came in. And what we saw, no offense to any lobbyists who might be in the room, but is that lobbyists outlived most legislators. So we saw a lot of legislators in trying to understand an issue that may be really complex. You're going to the lobby corps, and it really took power away from constituents and legislators. So I know that Prop 1, there was an amendment to that, but hopefully elections are term limits. We now have fair districts. They're more competitive. They're in line with the state on the whole. That's my argument back to people. I know it's a tough issue because we want new blood. We want people to come in and out. But if we've got competitive districts, if they're not doing their job, vote them out of office.
Representative Grant, I'm curious about your thoughts as a new lawmaker who's, again, like learning the ropes for the first couple weeks. What does it mean then, within 2 years, suddenly you're like a chair of a committee?
Yeah, so I completely agree. One of the first times I was out knocking doors locally for local elections, we had just introduced term limits in Grand Rapids for our mayor and our city commissioners. And I was really enthusiastic about it. And I remember my dad said, your vote is the term limit. If someone's not doing their job, your vote is what, says that. And it just really framed things for me, because it is helpful when someone who hasn't been doing their job has to leave because of term limits. But it says more when the voters are the reason that they leave. And it's wonderful when someone who is doing an amazing job is able to stay and really influence things because they have that opportunity. But yeah, for me, looking at what, when I first put in to run for this seat, 6 years was still the possibility. And then when we got to the general, 12 years becomes the possibility. And it just really changes how you approach this. Now you are looking to have, if you weren't before, you're looking to have relationships on the other side of the aisle. You're looking to really specialize in something. What is your thing? What do people know they can come to you about? And what will you shape in the state, because you may be here for a while?
Oh, I just, Representative Postmus, you might have sort of a unique perch on this because you come from a political family. Start with, your father was a state representative. He never served in the House?
Right.
Okay. He was just a state senator, Senate Majority Leader. Then he was lieutenant governor, tried for governor, sorry. And he was an advisor to Governor Snyder. What perspective does that give you on how much you know and how much you don't know about doing this job as a legislator?
So there's two things to really consider. First of all, most people don't realize prior to the term limits the way they were before this most recent reform was enacted, prior to that, when we had no term limits, the average tenure of a legislator before they left office was actually less than the tenure of a term limited state senator was on our previous term limit. So while you always hear the story of the people that stay for 40 years or 30 years or whatever ridiculousness that actually wasn't the norm. So that's the first thing. But having grown up in a political family, it was an interesting dichotomy because I grew up with a dad who was a farmer and a legislator. And essentially, that's what I am. I'm a farmer and a legislator. And it was a really interesting dichotomy, and it gave me a very unique perspective of Lansing. First of all, going back to a little bit about the divisiveness, right? Like, when I was growing up, one of my dad's closest friends was the Senate Minority Leader when my dad was the Senate Majority Leader. So I grew up hunting with the son of the Democrat leader, and we'd go to deer camp for a week, and we were really, really close. Could you imagine if the Senate Majority Leader went out, spent a week with the Senate Minority Leader today and just hanging out? Like, there would be a riot on both sides. And that's not a joke. So I come at it from that perspective, where the concept of statesmanship and diplomacy and relationship building is really important to me. And that's something that I've wanted to try to bring back into Lansing when I came.
Senator DeMoose, I'd love your thoughts because one of the things that a lot of political insiders in Lansing talk about is one of the changes with the change in term limits that was just approved in November is that it may be that fewer state reps then decide to run for the Senate. And sometimes in previous past sessions, there's almost seems like it's not so much an issue of Republicans against Republicans. It was like House versus Senate. And I'm curious whether you think this will change that dynamic and whether it also creates a little bit more of an equilibrium between the two chambers and makes the Senate not seem, I don't know, so glamorous. Sorry to say.
Well, I mean,
It's glamorous.
recognize.
You're like, who just called the
Not
state
just
Senate
a senator,
glamorous?
but a state senator.
So I mean, you got to keep in mind, I've had an illustrious 2-year career, so I'm not an
And
expert
2
at
weeks
this.
in the Senate now.
Right. And so, I mean, I chose just on my own to run because the Senate seat was perfect for me and I love it and stuff like that and things like that. I do think, though, it's important going back to some of what my colleagues are saying here is that if you think about it in the House, by the old rules, the most experienced Speaker of the House you're ever going to have has 4 years of legislative experience. I mean, that's crazy to have the number 2 or 3 or however you name it person in the state 4 years. And we've seen the product of that. You know, we have seen the downside of that. And I think this is going to help that quite a bit. I know there's going to be, you know, most people who are run for the legislature, it's a matter of numbers, don't end up in the Senate, but you do see people strategizing and plotting. Now, I did something that was totally irresponsible. And I gave up, you know, a very safe seat and just said, I'm going to go for it, risking this whole thing because it was a family decision. We thought we'd do it. But a lot of people do strategize and plot that out. But now that they can stay for 12 years, I think it's going to give a lot more stability.
So can I ask as briefly as possible, but it's an open-ended question. There are absolutely times in this session where you guys are going to go at each other about things that you and your fellow caucus members feel passionately about. And you know what those issues are. Abortion, taxes, you know, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Have you thought at all about how you're going to handle the really, really angry debates and then the aftermath of those debates when hopefully, especially during that brief season that precedes the election season where you need to get things done, how you're going to, you know, try to come back together to make things happen, and you choose your order.
I mean, I'll go just because this is something I spend a lot of time thinking about. And for a long time, I've been part of the group in Washington, D.C. that does the National Prayer Breakfast. And this is a group of the most wildly divergent group of people you could ever imagine coming together to pray together for the country. It's just a great thing. But I can tell you that there will come those times. And in my mind, one of the biggest things is to recognize that we disagree on an issue, but not to judge someone's motivations. Last term, I had an interesting conversation with somebody who is a very, very progressive Democrat who I really, really like. And she and I have done a number of bills together. People joked about us being sort of an odd couple because we're totally different sides of the spectrum. We talked about the hardest one, abortion. I happen to be pro-life, and don't hate me for it. My wife was a war baby in Vietnam. She was came to the U.S. in a cardboard box. I look at the precious woman that she is, and I realize that she could have been lost. Now, the difference, I told her, I said, listen, you have to understand, I see this as a child. I don't want to take anyone's rights away. I really don't. And I get your point of view, but I see it as a child. And she said, well, I understand that. I disagree with you, but I understand it. Likewise, I had to tell her, I don't see you as a baby killer. I mean, if you listen to everybody on my side of the aisle, they're awful. Like walking around with those signs, this is horrible. These are people who find themselves in a terrible moment in life, and they need our love and compassion and support. And when I talk to her like that, we could go on and work together, even though we totally disagree on this one issue. We at least give each other the benefit of the doubt that we're thinking, feeling human beings, that we got there. And I think if you approach each other like that with love and compassion towards one another, instead of I'm going to get you and I hate you, we can handle these bumps really well.
Well, let's just go, you know, in this direction. How much thought have you given to, especially you're in majority now, you're going to, you know, run the table at times that are going to really offend your Republican colleagues. How do you plan for the aftermath of those fights?
So something that's really important to me, and John hit on it, is I'm never going to forget how I have felt for the past 4 years when somebody you work with who you see every single day accuses you of being a pedophile and a groomer and wanting 8-year-olds to believe they were responsible for slavery. There is no coming back from that. There isn't. We can debate on the issues. We can recognize that issues are separate from us as people. We can be passionate about them, but then we can get together and talk about it afterwards because we're still colleagues and we still look each other in the eyes every day. And we have to get out of this politics where you make the person that you work with an enemy, because there just isn't coming back from that.
And I think, I don't want to make this a partisan, but I mean, raise your hand if you saw Senator McMurrow's speech on the Senate floor. Yeah, you and I don't know, what is it at now, like 100 million views or something like this. And I think part of the reason that resonated was because you spoke exactly like that. And it was a powerful moment, I think, in American politics, not just Democratic politics, right? But this idea that certainly got a lot of attention last year. Representative Grant, have you thought about how you're going to handle this?
I have. We are going to do some hard work, and that means that unfortunately there will be two sides of a lot of these issues that are coming forward. And for me, it's really about having my why, knowing exactly why I support certain things, and being willing to hear the other. I can respect when someone else has strong conviction that is backed up by reasoning, by data, by what they believe, and I can agree to disagree. At the end of the day, what I am hoping for and looking forward to is focusing on the people that we represent, focusing on people and not making a spectacle of politics. And I think that is when really, the exchange gets a little outside of the bounds. And that's really hopeful for me. That shows the freshman side of who I am. But I can respect when someone is focused on who their people are and why their people sent them here. That makes things a little more civil. Hopefully.
I think there's a couple things to think about. One, I think I can speak for Senator DeMoose too. I will never impugn the character of another member of the legislature. I think that's a very important place to start, because not only that, but if you look at it from the standpoint of, to the senator's point, of enemies, there's no way diplomacy and statesmanship works that way. So we have to look at it. We have to be respectful of each other and also understand what the intentions are, right? Like where's their heart? I know every single person that's sitting on the stage right now came to Lansing because they thought that they could be a good servant for their community. And I can respect that. We may disagree all day long on policy, but I can tell you I have a lot of respect for the things the representative and the senator from the other aisle, from across the aisle. I can respect what they are trying to accomplish and what they want to accomplish and what they have accomplished. And, I think that's where we have to start. We have to start from respect and understand we may have temporary opponents, but there's going to be issues that we work together on. I'm willing to bet that 65 or 70% of the issues we probably agree on, maybe minute differences, but we probably agree 65% of the time. It's that 25, 35% of the time where we're going to fight. But that being said, I'll go shake hands afterward.
So you all want some consensus to get along, respect. I think voters feel the same way, yet it feels like we're the angriest we've ever been. Yeah. What's at fault? What needs to change?
Well, we got to decide to make this real. Like, it's one thing at the beginning of a term for all of us to be sitting here talking. Did I do something wrong?
No,
sorry.
He's telling me open it up to other questions, lady.
I got you. No, so
and then do you know what Senator DeMoose said?
I thought maybe I went out of turn or something. No, but it's the beginning of a term. We're all kind of excited. We're all having fun with this. So it's really easy to do it right now. But the thing is, you got to make this really deep commitment. I think everybody up here certainly will, because it's a lot harder when you're in the middle of it and you actually do get mad. And it's sort of going back to that guy I was talking to earlier. It is, and what has been told to me by some of my constituents. And the point is, they want me to indulge my anger. That's the easiest thing in the world sometimes. I well up, I've given into that. And you walk away, and boy, I sure showed them, pat yourself on the back and sit down and say, my goodness, what have I done? I broke down another human being. I didn't mean to do that. And now I've made an adversary when we were friends. And so the point is, we have to choose now and then choose to stick with it like 6 months from now when we're actually in the battles there.
Everybody gonna pinky swear here up on the table or something? I know we've got a question over here, Dan. Yeah.
And then we've got another one back there.
Barbara O'Kelly, and it's more a comment than a question directed at Zoe and Rick. Please focus. It's so tempting to pay so much attention to the controversies in your news reporting. Maybe you could make a vow to pay more attention to where the compromise is and when it works.
It's a fair and reasonable request, but I will point out that the easy stuff is attention is less necessary on the easy stuff than on the difficult stuff. And on the difficult stuff is where you're getting into the controversy and people working through how to get from no to yes. That's why we spend so much time on that.
When they said when it gets to yes.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that is absolutely part of the story.
Absolutely.
She said, but when it gets to yes, and
Make sure we report
yes.
on it.
Mhm.
And there's a table, just reporters right here. You all hear that too. When it gets to yes.
Yeah, guys.
Come on. I really,
She's talking to you too.
just very quickly, this group over here is basically the smartest table in all of Lansing, and they're watching all of you as well. We have Sam Robinson, who's with Axios. Hey, Sam. Jordan Hermany with M Live, who's just rocking it. Simon Schuster, also with M Live, killing it. And Colin Jackson with the Michigan Public Radio Network.
He's pretty good.
He's amazing. Andrew Roth over here in the back as well. So I just want to say, Dan Netter with the State Paper, like these are folks who absolutely are going to bring the stories and also hold truth and accountability. So I just want to give that shout out. And you hear a lot of them on Michigan radio too, and it's just politics as well. I know there was a question over here, but I also want to give the online audience some love. They are wondering how you guys actually feel like you can impact inflation. Right? On the campaign trail, I thought it was interesting. Governor Whitmer was really clear to call it global inflation, right? And this idea that a governor can't just wave a magic wand and change things. But I'm curious.
At the state level,
At
what
the state
can
level,
you
what
do
can actually
about
be done?
inflation? You know, we've done this a whole bunch of times. Let's do.
I'll start. So that's a great question. You know, fiscal policy, monetary policy, we don't do a lot of that at the state level. So inflation itself, one, it's a national thing. And two, there is a little bit of a global aspect of it in this current scenario as well. But what we can do is we can provide relief to the taxpayers. We can provide relief to people, everyday Michiganders that are just going to the grocery store from the standpoint of providing tax relief at the gas pump, or making the earned income tax credit immediate, or there's a lot of things that we can do that's not necessarily going to change inflation, but it, at least for the time being, can help you in your pocketbook.
Representative Grant?
I agree. Looking at how can we get dollars into taxpayers' hands, which is something that we showed right out of the gate was really important to the Democratic Party. And I do appreciate the bipartisan support there. I appreciate our colleagues on the other side of the aisle sharing their ideas, but I would just like to say we would have loved to gotten this done before we were here too. And so, you know, as we have these conversations, I'm happy to see colleagues come along. We just have to keep in mind, like, we are doing years of work that we were hoping would have been done for a really long time. And so it's going to be a heavy lift, and we're addressing some of these things, but we've inherited a lot of these issues, not inflation, so to say, because that didn't happen just in Michigan, but across the board. So we appreciate the time now to address those things, and we're doing it as quickly as possible.
Senator McMorrow, cost of living.
Yeah. So on inflation, Governor Whitmer talks about global inflation, and it's true because there is a disconnect in the market right now. The fact that costs are going up, wages are going up, people are still buying, the supply chain isn't there to catch up. There's not enough housing, there aren't enough eggs, that you name it, there aren't enough of it. So what happens is when the Fed tries to course correct, the people who need help the most are the ones impacted the most, the ones who can't afford the mortgage, the ones who are getting hit by those interest rates the hardest. So from the state level, what we can do is look at that and on a very micro level, make sure we are targeting relief to the people who need it the most, to families who can get into their first house, to those who want to start a small business, to those who need paid leave or childcare, the things that we need that we know are going to get them through this moment so that we can get the supply chain caught up with where the market is, because people are still buying.
And I'm not going to add a ton to this. However, I will say that it is funny because we campaign on all these national issues that we really have no say in. But that's what the voters demand too, is what do you think about this? Well, I think this, I'm never going to vote on it, but here's what if you're interested in how I look at national politics, I'll more than happy to share it. There are a few things we tried to do. We tried to, and it may or may not have been a great idea. There was bad things to it too, but we tried to suspend the gas tax. That would have actually taken the price down for a certain period of time. I'm more, and I think you're going to find this too, because I came in, we all run for the first time thinking, wow, I'm going to go down to Lansing, I'm going to change things. And I saw this, I actually talked about this in my campaign. It's so much harder to campaign the second time because the first time I didn't know what I didn't know. And I thought, well, I'm gonna make everything different. Now I can go in and say, look, I'm gonna work really hard to make some incremental changes that might affect a policy you'll notice 4 years from now. But that's really what we can do.
Bumper sticker. That's a really good tagline.
Yeah, exactly. And I have a marketing background. It doesn't work. It's not fun. But so people were trying to fix this, and these are complicated issues. But I think my big concern is, so you do look at the sheer amount of money in the weird economy we had the past few years, pumping money in, and it's not just Republicans, it's not just Democrats. Everybody was responding to a totally new issue, and they tried to do their best to make it, but it's had some bad consequences. It's really damaged our workforce. It's damaged our money supply. It's damaged so many things. So I don't know that there's a statewide solution, but I do know that one priority for us should be to not make it worse. And I've been saying this for a long time. We have a $9 billion surplus now. This could be a gift to us if we use it well and we use it wisely. And if we build back better, it's not a Republican line at all, but it's not a bad idea. If we use it wisely, we could be really setting ourselves up for future success. If we use it poorly, to create a bunch of new expensive programs and to give it away without recognizing the ramifications from an economic perspective, we could really be doing ourselves in. So the state, I think, just needs to, more than help inflation, there isn't a lot we can do, but we need to make sure we don't make it worse.
So thanks for bringing up that number, 9 billion. Like just mind-boggling amount of money that the state of Michigan has right now.
She really walks around the house just going 9 billion.
I do actually. We have these
No, she
conversations at home because this is a transformative amount of money. So last Friday, there was this really sexy thing that happened, the Consensus Revenue Estimating Conference. I know, it gets everybody in Lansing super hot and bothered. But basically, the fact is now there is $9 billion of money. Democrats running the table. Christine Grant, representative, like when you hear that kind of money, what's the first thing that you would want to change or get to do? And bless you.
Well, that's a hard question.
I know.
Where do you start?
Because it's so much. Actually, when we were talking to who said Chris Kolb, Chris Kolb, the former
state budget director,
was complaining to someone about how he didn't have that money when he was budget director or something like that. And then the new budget director was like, no, this is way worse.
Yeah, but to me, it's those fundamental things. So we talk a lot about the problems, but to me, those are really just outcomes of where we have made investments, right? We've made investments in certain ways and we see, or we have not, and we see the outcomes. So for me, it's like, where do we need key investments that will turn around those outcomes that have been a problem for us? So I spent 6 years on the Grand Rapids Public School Board, right? So education, to me, no matter matter where you choose to send your child, the strength of our public school districts really reflects the strength of a community and a state. So when we talk about some of those supply chain issues, we talk about not having people to man and staff certain industries. We talk about the quality of workers that we have, right? A lot of that to me is investment that we have not made in the public education system. So that would be a good place to start.
Senator McMorrow.
Yeah, it is an exciting and a daunting number. $9 billion. I don't think people can wrap their head around like how many zeros that actually is and what that means. But I think what's really important for those of us on appropriations and as we move forward is to recognize that this is one-time funding, that we are never going to see this influx of money in our lifetimes likely. So what are the areas where we need to kind of fill up the gaps, catch up to now? What are projects that we've put off when it comes to infrastructure, when it comes to schools that don't have modern HVAC systems, schools that don't have the latest, just basic building requirements? What are the things that we've put off for so long that with this moment in time, we can take $9 billion and catch up to where we need to go and not set ourselves up for, with term limits where we're making decisions on ongoing programs that aren't going to be there when we're gone, but then we're not left to figure it out.
I think that's the key is that, I'm glad we agree on this, right? Like we can't use $9 billion to fund, we can't use one-time money to fund ongoing projects. And so the projects that we do invest in have to be transformative, generational investments. We invested a lot of funding into the city of Grand Rapids last year with some of the one-time funding budgets that is going to be transformative to that community. And that's what I'll be looking forward to working on with the $9 billion we have.
Well, that was general, and I'm not asking anyone to make actual commitments here, but give a concrete example of what a transformative one-time expenditure would be.
So there's two examples that I'll point to from Grand Rapids. One, we put in, or we've part of the budget was to go to an amphitheater downtown Grand Rapids, which is going to attract and develop the downtown community. We also are doing an entire riverfront restoration project on the river that flows through the city of Grand Rapids. I don't know if any of you have spent much time in St. Louis or I think Austin maybe. There's a city down in Texas as well where there's a big development on the waterfront on the river that runs through that. In San Antonio, yes, thank you very much.
Thank you, Dan.
In Grand Rapids, we have this beautiful river that, 100 years ago or whatever, they took out the rapids and built up all these seawalls on the side of it. And that's it. It's not used for anything. And so we invested, I think it's $65 million into developing that and creating greenway and parkway and restoring the rapids into there. And that is going to that is going to transform Kent County and the city of Grand Rapids for generations.
I mean, up in our area, there's a mental health facility. This would be transformative for people if we could build it. There's in Petoskey, Michigan, nearby where I live, Habitat for Humanity is building they're building a whole neighborhood of 43 homes, and we have a crisis in affordable housing. That'll be transformative for our area. The problem is, today alone, and this is not an exact, this actually happened. I had 4 different meetings. 3 of them used the exact same line. One guy said, well, this is a $50 million project. Well, that's a lot of money to ask for. Yeah, but compared to $9 billion, that's nothing. 3 people said that same thing. And the 4th one also asked for $6 million. He just didn't compare it to the $9 billion. But the point is, so that's one. Every one of us have gotten 4 people asking for that money today, and they'll get it tomorrow, and they'll get it the next day and the next day. And most of these are pretty worthy causes. So that $9 billion goes fast if you don't really pay attention to these things, and you got to pick and choose.
Can I just add one other example that I think we as a state are sorely behind in, and this is an opportunity for us to address, is public transit, especially in Metro Detroit, Southeast Michigan. It's one thing to expand bus routes. It's another thing to look at the fact that, especially Metro Detroit, I'm not talking about the rest of the state, but that we are really the only major metropolitan area in the country where if we want to have more conferences downtown, the only way to get there is to get a $60 Uber from the airport to get to downtown. There's no light rail. There isn't really, with the exception of one bus that goes back and forth. It's holding us back. So when we look at what is going to be transformational for a community, for the state, what's going to attract talent, which is the number one reason why companies are relocating to states, not because of incentives, but because of where the talent is. That's what I want to look at as an example of what can we do with upfront capital that is costly, but that we have money that we're never going to have in the rest of our lifetimes to do.
So writ large, though, you've explained the complication here, which is there isn't a transformational expenditure. It's hundreds, if not thousands, of transformational expenditures that all you guys and your colleagues have to go and sit in the House and Senate floor and really, in your caucuses and committee hearings and come up with an agenda of all of those things and try and make them work together in the awkward fashion that the legislature does that kind of work.
Yeah, y'all have fun with that. Let's ask another online question, which they're going at it, which is what's happening with right to work legislation? Who wants to grab that one?
Hey. How's it going?
How's it going? It's great. Going back to what I said in the beginning, that Democrats, I'm really proud of us in both chambers introducing what I think is a package of bills. Well, not a package, an introduction of 6 bills that really represents who we are. And part of who we are, this is a union state. Michigan created unions, the strength of unions. My great uncle, many people may not know, was John Sweeney. He was the head of the AFL-CIO. Scrappy Irishman from New York. And what we know is that there's very little research to back up that being a right to work state makes Michigan more competitive. It is never cited as the reason why companies are moving to or expanding in Michigan, but we know that it brings everybody's wages down. So we know that this is going to be a debate. We're going to have to work through it. We're going to have to make sure that all of the stakeholders are at the table. But the number one thing, going back to what's important to businesses expanding in Michigan, it is talent. And talent is going to relocate to Michigan if you know you can get a good job with a good wage that's going to make you able to buy a house, provide for your family, and right to work is holding us back from that.
Well, I mean, taking a little bit of the other side and recognize, I love labor. I love unions. I love the history of it. I'm fascinated by Jimmy Hoffa, and I haven't. I really actually.
We all are.
I just.
Who is it?
Well, he loved. Okay, for all the bad he did, he loved his people, and he fought for them. So I do recognize the role they do. I actually have a lot of labor union support. And I was talking to the head of, or the government relations part of one of those unions today. And I mean, he obviously disagrees with me, but I also grew up in the auto industry. And the fact of the matter is that Kentucky and South Carolina have an auto industry because of our right to work, our lack of a right to work policy in those days. I mean, there's a lot of evidence. That's why people started going to those places. It's why Toyota never built their cars here in Michigan. We've seen that the downside of this. I don't know that it needs to be such a divisive issue. I mean, there are ways to support. And in fact, this one union I was talking to who's been supportive of me, they've grown. He told me they've grown since Right to Work because they're offering a great service to their members. It's so valuably part of it. So I do think this is one of these things we're gonna have to argue about. But again, we're not gonna make it personal. It's a clear difference of opinion on this.
Representative Grant?
Yeah, so when we talk about repealing right to work, for me, it is a conversation around workforce. In Grand Rapids, if we contrast these two urban centers in the state, Detroit and Grand Rapids, I pay close attention to the communities of color and how are they able to build wealth and raise their families. Grand Rapids, Michigan is one of the worst places in the country to be an African American as far as your career. Forbes has said it, we've topped all of these lists, and it says it's one of the worst places to build wealth if you're African American. You can work the same exact job with the same exact credentials, and your wages will be lower. What we know is that unions help to build out the middle class. And if you look at Detroit, where there was a strong union presence, African-American families were able to build wealth. Now, over the last 40 years and some time, we've seen an attack on those things. But in Grand Rapids, where we did not have that presence, and where as a person of color or a minority of some sort, you were standing alone and you didn't have a group of people supporting your rights, it's so much harder. And so when we look at building a strong workforce of people who are they are supported and they are appreciated, I think the presence of unions are absolutely necessary. Now, the unions of today will look different than unions 20, 30, 40 years ago. But what I have seen 6 years on the school board is that our union leaders were finding ways to stay relevant that weren't necessarily productive, because they were trying to prove their worth to people who may not have valued what a union did because their power was taken away. I'm looking forward to union representatives being able to get back to doing real work that brings dollars and value back to their members.
Can I say something real quick?
please.
So while we're talking about the city of Grand Rapids, right to work passed in Michigan just over 10 years ago. And in that 10-year span, actually the city of Grand Rapids for all demographics has never grown economically to the extent that it has. In the last 10 years, it's grown faster for all demographics than it has any other 10-year period in history. Whether that can be associated with right to work, that's not what I'm saying. What I am saying is that is a fact. This is going to be a divisive issue that we are going to disagree on, and we are going to fight on this one. And the other thing that I would suggest is that the majority of union members actually disagree with forced unionization. My view is I support unions. I think unions have a role and a responsibility and should continue to exist. I don't support forced unionization.
Well, hold on. Can we just correct? It's not forced unionization if your workforce and your colleagues, your counterparts have voted to form a union. You can't, when we have an election and a majority of people vote for you to be in office, and I'm not attacking you, it's just you as an example. You don't get to say, well, I want this person to be my representative. And it's the equivalent sort of thing. I mean, people have the freedom to work in any workplace they like. But if you want to work in a unionized workforce and have the benefits that union has negotiated and argued for, that's the rub. It's not forced unionization. Your colleagues have all already voted to create that union, and you're saying no.
But do we not run ourselves into this idea of the tyranny of the majority? I mean, I should have a right to work at Ford Motor Company on the line if they're willing to hire me, and I shouldn't be forced to join a union. I probably would, because the UAW has been great for workers. There's no question. I think it's just that difference of degree there of where we should be involved.
I think it's a fascinating conversation. It was almost 10 years, December 11th, I think, of 2012. And I know, I think it's something that everybody is watching because, as Rick was talking about earlier, there's going to be plenty of legislation that I think we are going to see compromise on. But I think Senator McMurrow, as you're saying too, Michigan and unions and the history of goes back a very long time, and you can tell how passionate people are. And also asking specifically,
we could
about
do a
what that
whole
was.
issues and ale just.
I think
on
we
this.
probably should. I was actually going to, on the car ride home, call Krapinski, our marketing director, and say that probably needs to be the next one. We have a few minutes left to take a couple more audience questions. So we've got a hand over here, Dan, and then let's go up front too. Oh, right here. Sorry. Yeah. Yep. Oh, sure. Yep. Right here.
Sorry.
The senator mentioned that there's a union that has expanded with right to work. Which union would that be?
Well, I don't know. It was a private conversation. I don't know that they want me to do it, but he told, and I'm not, don't get me wrong. I'm not lying to you. I'm telling you the truth. He told me this, but I don't know that I want to speak for them. They said, and no, don't get me wrong. Also, they want right to work gone. But he did tell me that actually they have grown during under the right to work regime, just because they're offering a good service. But
what venue is it in?
I'm sorry.
What venue?
What do you mean? What venue? What
I think she's asking, where did the conversation happen?
Oh, the conversation happened at their training headquarters.
I mean, the union. What venue is the union in?
Well, they're
industry.
Yeah, but if I tell you that, I'm telling you who they are. I'm not lying to you. I mean, this is one of the.
Okay.
Okay.
If there's ever a such thing as an honest politician, John is that.
I think he's uncomfortable, and it was a conversation with a constituent, possibly that he
I don't want to
wanna-
get him in any trouble. Maybe he was speaking out of turn. That's all. So
Let's go to this question here in the beginning.
So we've seen a lot of, you mentioned divisiveness already, and we've lost a lot of confidence in our institutions. Obviously, everybody on the stage has a commitment to public service, but what can we do to get regular people to have confidence in our institutions again?
I love that question so much. I would also add, if it's okay, a little asterisk, which is, I think over the 5, 6, 7 years, it's not just like the institution of government, but it's institutions like science, education, teachers, I'd say journalists even as well, public servants, medical community. Yeah, I was sort of, when I said scientists, I think I was also thinking about healthcare and things like that. Representative Posthumus, let's start here. What can we do to bring back confidence in institutions?
I don't know. I mean, if I'm being honest, like
it's a totally
very
fair answer.
difficult thing to do. I mean, when you have every idiot on a soapbox with social media being able to spout off anything they want and actually be taken seriously, then that's not helpful. And so I don't know. I truly do not, and I wish I had a better answer than that.
Representative Grant?
Yeah, that is a hard one. I mean, as a caucus and as a party, I think the way that we build trust is to listen to the people that we're representing and deliver on the things that we've promised. But you know, when you look at politics and political things, it has very much become a form of entertainment. And so that takes away even some of the power from us when it's entertainment for people to see on social media or on the TV, just quick blurbs of things, and you're not getting the full picture. During campaign, even I had a very tight primary. No one wanted to hear like the real answers of things. I would explain like what really happened. They'd be like, oh, well, what he said, like, because that was more fun to hear. And so I hope that changes, but I don't know that it will.
Senator McMurrow, can you fix it all?
No. I think there's a lot to be said for that. I mean, I caught flack from people in my party once. I was at an event and I advised that people not watch any 24-hour news network, which I know is ironic because I'm on one of them all the time now. But it's true, because if it's 24 hours where it's constantly, this is breaking news and this is set to make you mad. And I remember when I started in the Senate, I was just walking the halls in the Senate office building, and you can immediately tell which office is which party by what is playing in the lobby. And we've gotten to a place where a lot of people treat this work and politics as a game, and it's my team versus your team. And there's a really good book that I recommend everybody read called Politics is for Power, which really breaks this down, especially for Democrats. It's very critical of us, by the way, to talk about what it is actually supposed to be about, which is organizing and bringing people together. And how do you bring more people onto your side for each issue, which may change from issue to issue. But that's really tough, because I know that it's really easy to want to go to a rally and cheer and fight. But the more that we treat it like a game, the more it encourages the fighting and the divisiveness and the way that our campaigns are structured, where it's easy to raise money when you get in a fight, and it's not when you're, saying I compromise and I'm, what was the line you said that I thought was so great? That's not on a bumper sticker.
Well, the
incremental change. Yeah, I'm going to work really hard to make incremental change over a period of years.
When I won't be in office.
When I won't be in office anymore. That's hard, but that's the real work. And I don't know how we break out of that. I mean, it's probably a combination of campaign finance reform and breaking out of the algorithms that feed us all different news feeds. But just fundamentally, I think that's the work that I know I try to do, and I'm pretty confident the people on the stage do, is just go out into the communities. I mean, we host precinct potlucks in my district where we just find a person who will volunteer their driveway or their backyard, and we canvass the neighborhood and we say, next Thursday, your state senator is coming. And we all have like chips and guac and we just get to know each other. And it gets us off of TV and our screens and we just talk to each other. And it's nice.
As long as policy debate happens over 15-second TikTok videos, we're going to have a hard time.
Yeah. And I got to just add to that, that it's not just.
You have 15 seconds.
I do? Really? Oh.
And you have to dance.
Good. That's good. There's a reason you do this. No, there is a bit of a false narrative out there. And it's not just on the politicians. It's our culture too. I mean, honestly, I've seen way more anger out in the culture than there ever should have been. It's not just here. But so there's a false narrative that we're all lining our pockets. I mean, I'd love to see where this money comes from. This is an expensive job to do. That we're just in it for ourselves or we're here to fight. We had a film production company, and I got to work with people on both sides of the aisle. We did a lot of things celebrating bipartisanship in Washington. And I remember one of the most profound interviews I had was Senator Mark Warner, a Democrat from Virginia. And he said something so simple, but it was so true. And he knew I was a Republican, and we were talking. He said, John, one thing you got to remember is that most people who come here just really want to do a good job. He's right. I mean, what the caliber of people I've met in my brief time here on both sides of the aisle, there are some wonderful people out there who are pouring their heart and soul, who had a vision that they think they can do something. I mean, a lot of us are still true believers, like we can make this world a better place. It's not that corny. That said, every now and then something happens that betrays that entire reality, like what happened with our former speaker. That's why I'm so mad about that. And he was my predecessor because he confirmed all the narrative, and I don't mean to condemn legally all this. I shouldn't get as into it as I do. But the bottom line is that those type of things are so damaging because there are good people up here trying to do a good job. And it can't be just something we fix in Lansing or in Washington. These meetings we go to is you got to understand the all-out assaults we're under. I get it from my own party all the time and from the other party. And you almost become guarded and removed. And now all of a sudden we're not doing the job we were elected to do, mainly because this is not a normal way of interacting. And it didn't used to be like this. So I think we got to fix the things people say over social media. I can't believe these things are said. It's just not right. And so this is something that's throughout our entire culture. We need to model it for sure. And when we break down, we confirm everything they think, but we need to see some changes on the cultural level too.
Well, I'm looking at the time and I know we've got to wrap up shortly. So I'm going to just ask a final question. And again, we'll start here and kind of work our way around. Representative Posthumous, what will success look like for you in 6 months? Like, what will you have needed to do or what will have happened where you can go like, you know what, the first 6 months of this legislative season were successful for me?
If we can deliver economic relief through putting money back in your pockets through tax cuts that happens immediately, that'll be a success for me in the next 6 months.
Representative Grant?
For me, it will be something that ties in with what the senator said earlier. There have been a lot of investments over the past few years in my city, in cities across the state, but those investments, the amphitheater is in my district. On the edge, it does not reach the people who are in the heart of the district. And so we make these investments and we make changes, but it sometimes does not reach the people who need it the most. And so if we're making decisions that help to change the lives of the people who need it the most, that will be successful to me.
So I've had an interesting first 4 years, and I gave an interview a few months ago where the interviewer said, it sounds like you got elected, you ostensibly have all this power, but it turns out the only power you have is giving speeches. I thought about that every day afterwards. So for me, I take this job very seriously. And now that I'm chairing a committee and I'm serving on appropriations, the 6 months of success for me is having really thoughtful debates in our committees, getting to know all of our colleagues and what they care about, and starting to show that outside of just being a spokesperson, I can be a legislator too.
That's great. No, that's great. That's a complicated question because it goes back to, I'm looking back towards my first 2 years, and it's really hard. There's no benchmarks. I mean, it's really hard to say, did I do a good job or not? And the things I count as wins are not even bills that my name are on. I got involved, a rep who was just passionate. Same progressive rep who I talked to was passionate about this tax on feminine hygiene products. And it was stalled. And so she came, we were talking, she laid out the case. I said, well, that seems like a good idea. I'm going to help you fight for this. And so I went to a number of people and they're like, oh, that's crazy. Why would you do that? It's just a big liberal cause. Why we're never going to do it. But why is this a big liberal cause? I mean, who really wants to tax?
Should point out that this whole issue is called the tampon tax.
The tampon tax. Yeah.
And this has been really, really intractable over
but it's crazy. Who wants this tax? This is just a sign of respect, and it's just ridiculous. So I went and I spent 6 months lobbying Matt Hall, who was the head of tax policy, good guy. He was my seatmate. And he, he didn't quite get it. I would lobby different members, and they're like, John, why do you care so much about this? I'm like, I don't really know, but it seems like the right thing to do. But the bottom line is, they finally passed it. And I remember standing up with this. I asked to speak because if you're involved in a bill, you can speak on the floor. And so I asked to speak, and I did it for one reason. And I'm not tooting my own horn. I'm saying if the more of these, I'm proud of this moment. The only reason I did it is so she could stand next to me because she wasn't on that bill and she needed to get some credit because this is something she cared about. Like, if we can do some of these things, we're not going to save the world in 6 months, but if the more of those little moments you can string together, where, like at the end of the year last year, I really thought that year I said, okay, that's something that I was involved with that mattered. And I think we can string these things together. We'll be doing a good job.
Okay, everyone, another really big round for the 4 lawmakers.
Thank you very much for doing this.
Who again, the first day of their legislative term was a week ago. So to come out tonight and answer these questions, I know it means a lot to you all. It means a lot to us. And then thank you so much for everybody coming out and all of your questions and your delightful smiles to get to see in
And sorry
person.
for the ones we didn't get to. I know that there are more out there.
And I really hope everyone is like Andrea Bitely, who's in the audience, and recognizes as well that we're able, again, I'll just say it once more, to keep these events free because of folks who give to Michigan Radio as members. And you can find out more information about becoming a member. And again, get all the free swag at the table. Thanks so much, everybody. Good night. And another round of applause.
She manages it well.